Salman Rushdie, after 33 years with a death fatwa hanging over his head, has been stabbed. He is seriously injured, although reports are that he's recovering. There's an awful lot that can and should be said about that, so I will send over to David for initial impressions.
Now everyone's blasting away. There are a ton of people who are blasting away at Islam right now,
Yes.
online and books and so on. Back in the 80s, I mean, no one was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So for this guy just comes out of nowhere and, hey, you know what? I'm going to write a book that brings up one of the most embarrassing moments in the history of Islam, the satanic verses, where Muhammad admittedly delivered revelations from Satan, promoting polytheism, told his followers they can pray to 3 pagan goddesses, and that these pagan bird goddesses, these cranes, can carry their prayers to Allah. See, guys, keep in mind in Islam, Allah's not omnipresent, right? That's why in the hadith it will say to hear your prayers, Allah has to come down. He has to come down to the lowest heaven. He comes down and, oh, okay, now I'm down here. Let me listen, right? Well, the alternative is for someone else to carry your prayers up to Allah. So, as messengers.
Especially bird goddesses are good for that.
Yeah.
The exalted cranes.
Oh, perfect. You've got these bird goddesses. And then it's interesting because you see how Muhammad's desires influenced his revelations, even according to the story, right? Even according to this story, the earliest versions of this story have Muhammad really, really sad and brokenhearted because his tribe rejects him and doesn't accept Islam. So he's longing for some sort of revelation that will draw them in. And then one day he gets the revelation he's looking for. He delivers the revelation saying that Muslims can now pray to Allat, Alusa, and Manat. And according to the story, Muhammad delivers the verses. He bows down to them. His followers bow down, and then his pagan tribe, the Quraysh, bows down in honor of this revelation in Surah 53 of the Quran. And then a little later, Muhammad comes back and says, sorry, the devil made me do it. Satan tricked me. But this is so embarrassing because, one, it means Muhammad couldn't tell the difference between a revelation from God and a revelation from Satan. Two, it means that Muhammad committed the unpardonable sin, like the worst sin you can commit. And actually had pagans bowing down in honor of a revelation promoting prayers to pagan goddesses and so on. Three, according to Deuteronomy 18, their favorite passage from the Old Testament to quote as far as prophecies about Muhammad, the number one passage they go to is Deuteronomy 18:18, where God says that he's going to send a prophet like Moses. But just 2 verses later, Deuteronomy 18:20, God says, if a prophet delivers a revelation that didn't actually come from God, or if he speaks in the names of other gods and goddesses, that prophet shall die. So Muhammad would have been sentenced to death by Moses for delivering the satanic verses. So for the first basically 1 to 2 centuries of Islam, that was taken for granted. Later they start editing the story out until you get down to our age and Muslims act like, no, this is just a fiction. It's all a forgery. And then Salman Rushdie comes in there and just like throws it in everyone's faces, the story of the satanic verses, but like a fictionalized book that includes parts of the story. But and so they were so mad about that. They had to, again, I was 12 and this guy decided to poke that hornet's nest.
It's in Zamakhshari, which goes back to the 12th century. It is in the Islamic sources. I have to emphasize this. This is not something the enemies of Islam concocted, although a lot of Islamic apologists like to say that today.
Shahab Ahmed, have you heard of him?
I don't think so.
It was Princeton and Harvard. He graduated with his PhD from one and then he taught at the other. I think he graduated from Princeton and then taught at Harvard. But he wrote a book. He wrote his doctoral dissertation on the satanic verses.
Oh yeah.
Where for his doctoral dissertation, he translated 37 sources on the satanic verses, right? And then shows how the story was gradually watered down over time. Mm-hmm. At first, the story is Satan delivers the revelation to Muhammad in the same way that Gabriel does. Muhammad doesn't know the difference and so on. Later, they have Satan imitating his voice and so on. By the time you get to Bukhari, which Shahab doesn't even include, by the time you get to Bukhari, all the pagans bow down in honor of Surah 53, but they don't explain why, right?
Yes.
It's just a great mystery why they did it. But then posthumously, so he died, but posthumously they published a book on the satanic verses that now he had 50 sources. So I read his doctoral dissertation, but I wanted to read the new version where he has 13 extra sources.
Oh, I got to get that.
Verses.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Can you imagine 50 sources and Muslims? Oh, no, it was all made up. It was all made up, really.
You know, there's so many incidents of this, David, where we have Islamic apologists in the West counting on the ignorance of Western non-Muslims. And so they know that 99.99% of Western non-Muslims do not read the Islamic sources or the writings of so-called Islamophobes, and so they don't have any idea. Oh, terrific.
Got it. Before orthodoxy, the satanic verses in early Islam.
I got to get this book.
Orthodoxy. He calls it before orthodoxy because he points out that the original doctrine is called Ismat al-Anbiya. Ismat al-Anbiya, and that is the doctrine of Allah's protection of the prophets. He points out that in the first 2 centuries of Islam, the doctrine of Ismat al-Anbiya meant that Allah is going to protect prophets from persisting in error, right? He's going to protect them from persisting in it. So a prophet can mess up, do something really, really messed up and stupid, and then Allah will bring him out of that and have him apologize. So given that doctrine, the story of the satanic verses was fine to them, right? Because it fit perfectly with the doctrine. Muhammad messed up, Satan duped him, and then Allah rescued him out of it. But they point out that in the 2nd century of Islam, the doctrine of Allah's protection of the prophets changed so that it came to mean that Allah will protect a prophet from all major sin. Well, telling Muslims they can pray to pagan goddesses is about as major as you can get in Islam. So that was no longer acceptable. And so it had to be weeded out in light of the theology. So isn't that interesting that history gets modified to bring it in line with their changing theology? And so that's why he calls it before orthodoxy. Before modern orthodoxy, before these doctrines solidified, it was perfectly acceptable to tell it. And then now Muslims can't believe it, even though it obviously happened.
Beautiful, beautiful. Anyway, got a few stories about Rushdie. Of course, dumb infidels in the first place. The New York Times reported on Friday that the stabbing had taken place and added a motive was unclear. Major Eugene J. Stanishevsky of the New York State Police identified the suspect as Hadi Matar, a 24-year-old New Jersey man, because obviously that's the most important aspect of this man is this man's identity in light of his stabbing Rushdie, that he's from New Jersey. But he said late Friday afternoon at a news conference that there was no indication of a motive. Now, I don't think there's ever been a stabbing that has had more indication of a motive than the stabbing of Salman Rushdie. Ever in history. For 33 years, it's been crystal clear why anybody would attack Salman Rushdie. And then when it happens, we have the New York State Police and the New York Times saying, we don't know what's going on here. Why would anybody want to harm this cuddly little novelist?
One of life's great mysteries.
It is. It's an enduring and astonishing mystery. Meanwhile, in the Islamic Republic of Iran, at least according to the Associated Press, people were very happy about the news. Reza Amiri, a 27-year-old delivery man, said, I don't know Salman Rushdie, but I am happy to hear that he was attacked since he insulted Islam. This is the fate for anybody who insults sanctities. Now, where would he get this idea? 27-year-old delivery man living in the Islamic Republic of Iran, which fashions all of its laws after Sharia wherever possible. I mean, probably not traffic laws, but just about every other law is based on Islamic law. And this guy somehow gets the idea that somebody who insulted Islam, it's good for him to have been stabbed. And yet in the West, in the United States, we constantly are told that Islamic law is completely peaceful and benign and has no incompatibility whatsoever with Western values. So what is the disconnect here? How does this happen, David?
The tiny minority seem to be the ones who are saying, hey, let's not celebrate this. That's the tiny minority.
Yes.
Because it seems far more common for people to be celebrating this. And even the people who disagree, because you do have Muslims who think, hey, you know, this is a different time and so on, and we need to learn to get along with other people and so on. Even they don't like speaking out about it much, because then they start getting called unbelievers and apostates and heretics and so on. And so they just have to, you know, generally be quiet. And so you just have this people celebrating it, and people don't know what to do here. Like, we keep trying to say that this is just a tiny minority, and
Islamic Republic of Iran, of course, they were thrilled. They said they had nothing to do with it, but he had it coming. He deserved it, and it's his fault that it happened. Hadi Matar, you may have heard, his mom said yesterday or the day before that he took a trip to Lebanon, and he came back, he was all angry with her, and said, why didn't you raise me as a strict Muslim? And he had gone to Lebanon, become more religious. He comes back, he stabs Salman Rushdie.
Haven't we heard that like 8,000 times? that similar story right there?
I'm afraid so, yeah. That's an incredibly recurring theme in Jihad, is that you have a Muslim who's not religious, who lives a secular life, he's drinking, he's doing stuff that's not aligned with Islam, and he gets religion, he decides to turn his life around and be pleasing to Allah, and he goes jihad, and does so in order to commit a great good deed that outweighs all his bad deeds. And then the media says, well, see, he wasn't religious, he was drinking, he was going to strip bars, so he's not really a Muslim. But they don't get at all the turnaround and the repentance and the new life, and this is what Hadi Matar seems to have done in striking at Rushdie. Of course, Muhammad said there's no greater deed than jihad, so Hadi Matar's got all these sins. He figures if he goes jihad on Rushdie, then he's got a big, great good deed to outweigh all his little bad deeds.
Dear Muslim friends, if your Muslim leaders cannot properly represent Allah, the Quran and Muhammad, do you expect them to properly represent the Bible? If they lie to you about the Quran and the Bible, what else are they lying to you about? If you choose the God of the Jews and Christians, you must read the scriptures of the Jews and Christians to know their God. If you like what we do, please support this channel by subscribing and pressing the bell to be notified when a new episode is uploaded. Also, don't forget to like and share.